In society standards, employment can vary on all kinds of factors: physical health, background information, experience, and even nepotism. There are normal characteristics that an individual might lack or have. Unfortunately, it's not nearly half as easy for the mentally ill or challenged. To introduce this topic, let's start off with the main contradiction. How does society naturally treat mentally ill people, especially when it pertains to employment and the processes that follow after? The potential effects that could prevent mentally disordered people from obtaining jobs can be based on occurrences that have already happened in the past. Stereotypical traits can be used to discriminate them, which further progresses the image of unruliness, unstableness, and psychological incapability. It's discouraging enough to see there's clearly an already influential generalization of the entire group. According to our source, bias in hiring applicants with mental illness and criminal justice involvement, which shall be credited appropriately, of course, at the end of the segment, people who may be more compatible in society to work, regardless of mental stigmas, could also be affected by the people who share some of the same challenges and qualities. Along with this stereotypical behavior people believe all mentally ill people have, they tend to compare the more stable ones to others who may not have the same functionality. Sad to say, current coworkers of the mentally ill can also cause many misconceptions. In the words of our source, and I quote, he or she may still face discrimination from employers when actually attempting to secure viable employment opportunities. The very people they hire mentally ill, as far as individuals, can be some of the main perpetrators when it comes to the cruel treatment that they may receive in a work establishment. Some coworkers have been noted to target the mentally ill as well. According to our source, 36% of employees with psychiatric characteristics can be concentrated on continuously. Discrimination isn't just emotionally and verbally. Apparently, the mentally ill could also be discriminated against by receiving lower wages of pay. Now, of course, this is extremely concerning. Why should mental classifications dictate how much someone gets paid to afford the life that they rightfully deserve to live by law and human presentation? People try to argue there's an adequate factor by simple terms. It's not just the mentally ill who experience these things. Normal people also experience the same exact mishaps as them. Worker ethic, the amount an employee may obtain to apply it decently in the workplace, professionalism, and personal suitability for the job all plays a part in how much someone gets paid. Right? Okay. Sure. But when you have people who have mental mishaps that they deal with on a day to day basis, but still manage to carry themselves in similar ways as people who don't deal with the same qualities, why would it matter? Newsflash, it doesn't. Just say that you're prejudiced, and their views on the already presumed employees who are mentally ill are discriminatory and inaccurate. This plays into the next segment of our topic for today. Quick question for thought. Since work is already a bit harder for mentally disabled or incompatible individuals, why make it harder for them when society pays them lower than their coworkers, gives them low paying jobs, or turns them away from an opportunity of a lifetime altogether? Doesn't. And that is why this topic is so important. To conclude this segment, learning is very essential. These stigmas only exist because of the blatant ignorance that society confines itself to. There are many researchers and specialists, psychologists, psychiatrists, the list goes on forever, that understand this dynamic that gives us a more accurate, factual perspective that doesn't include personal opinions to benefit the people who are involved. We hope you enjoyed this topic and the different approaches we took today and think about everything that has been presented. Until next time.
Questions about the bias in hiring the mentally ill.
Okay.
For my first question, I have: do you think that there is a bias in hiring a person with living with mental illness, and if so, why?
I think that's a hard question because it depends on what they're being hired for and who the person is that's doing the hiring. And what their mental illness is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there are some people who maybe are uneducated in mental illness that have a little fear of people who have mental illness, and so they're concerned on how that might affect the work environment and the job that the person does. So yeah, I think there's some.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And then, do you think we've gotten better in reducing the stigma of mental health?
I do. I do think so. Over the many years that I've worked in this field, I have seen that there's a decline in the stigma because people have come to understand it better. We educate the public better, and plus it's not treated as a stigma so much. It's in movies, it's in TV shows, it's in books and magazines and all that kind of stuff. So people have learned to understand it a little better and know that how it can be controlled so that people can live what we call normal life.
Yeah, definitely. And then what more can we do to reduce the stigma?
Just further education, helping people to understand what mental illness is, that there's highs and lows and big mental illnesses and little ones. I think that just continuing to educate people about what that is, and that basically everybody has a little bit of it.
Yeah.
So, education always takes care of that kind of thing.
Definitely. Thank you so much for answering these questions for me.
You're welcome.
About the bias in hiring the mentally ill.
Okay.
For my first question, I have: do you think that there is a bias in hiring a person living with mental illness? If so, why?
Yes, I do think there's a bias, mainly because of the stigma that's attached to people who are living with mental illness, and also because people just don't understand a lot to do with mental illness.
Definitely. For my second question, I have: do you think we have gotten better in reducing the stigma of mental health?
I think we have a little, but not enough yet. There's still a lot of work to be done.
Definitely. And then for my last one, what can we do more to reduce the stigma?
I think we just need to talk more about it. We really do, as a community, as just a nation, we need to get behind people more by putting it in everyone's face, basically. Just putting it out there, talk about it, stop hiding it, so people reduce the stigma.
For my first question, I have: do you think that there is a bias in hiring a person living with a mental illness, and if so, why?
Yeah, I think for sure there is bias. People hiring the mentally ill. I think it's because people don't understand what mental illness is and what that means, and people are afraid of what they don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, oh, is this guy going to go crazy? Is he going to go off? We just don't understand what that means. So, yeah, I think it's just that.
Definitely. For my second question, I have: do you think that we've gotten better in reducing the stigma of mental health?
I think we have. I think every generation has gotten a little bit better. I think, the baby boomers were more pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing. Don't talk about it. Gen X, my generation, the best generation, I have to tell you.
Sure.
We just didn't talk about it. We just we were on our own and we just kind of fixed it. But I think every generation has gotten a little bit better, and your generation is more willing to talk about it, more willing to seek help. So, yeah, I think it has gotten better.
Definitely, I agree. And then for my last question, I have: what can we do more to reduce the stigma?
I think we just continue to have these conversations. We just need to continue to talk about mental health, what mental health means. It doesn't have to be this scary psychosis kinds of garbage. I mean, it's anxiety, depression, it's all those things that, we all live with at certain points of our life. So the more conversations we have, the more it becomes part of everyday life, and it just becomes normal. So just continue to talk about it.
Definitely.
In other related news, we'll speak on new research conducted with the individual placement and support method, or as it is referred to, the IPS method, which works in improving the quality and quantity of employment opportunities for those suffering with mental illness and history of arrest or incarceration. As employment is a key factor in rehabilitation and community life for those suffering from severe mental illness, hiring bias can lock many of the doors which allow them to move effectively and independently through the market. As an evidence-based practice, which specializes in helping those who are severely mentally ill in acquiring competitive employment, prior to this particular research done, little was known of its effectiveness with those who also had a history of arrest. In testing the effectiveness of the new IPS model of supported employment, a randomized controlled trial examined the employment outcomes of about 85 participants who were both severely mentally ill and had also a history of justice involvement. Some were assigned to the IPS method and others to a related competitor working in a job club approach centered on peer support. Built on an 8-principle foundation, the IPS method aims to consider consumer-decided eligibility with a focus on competitive employment. By integrating both mental health and employment services together, alongside an acknowledgement of client preferences and planned and work incentives and rapid employment searches, which work to individualize employment support. The primary reasoning for the IPS method's success above its competitors at the 1-year follow-up is easy to understand. Not only were the rates improved, but they were effectively doubled. It stands to reason that the IPS method is able to combat the primary barrier to employment, which most often occurs prior to employer contact, when the lack of engagement in employment services is the most detrimental. Though the IPS model can do little for the other barriers which mar the lives of those who are severely mentally ill and those who have a history of incarceration and arrest, as it can do absolutely nothing of matters such as seeking housing, dealing with ongoing medical problems, and a severe lack of financial backing and support. With an inability to effectively meet these needs in increasing years, in increasing recent years, IPS numbers have fallen when compared to past successes, but still stand as the most thorough and vetted means by which to receive support among all other employment services. The market only grows more competitive, and it is methods such as the IPS model which improve the lives of those who might otherwise suffer the weight of the stigma which follows the mentally ill, which follows those who've been incarcerated. I thank you for joining us today. And remember, if you're sending in that application, strike while the iron is hot, and don't be afraid to get a little support. Nothing can go wrong with that. Have a beautiful day, and this is us, signing